Today, I want to talk about something that has just pushed this conflict to a whole new level. China has sent a direct warning to Donald Trump regarding the Strait of Hormuz blockade. And the words China used were extremely exact, extremely careful, and highly threatening. According to reports, Chinese officials told the United States, "If you touch our energy lifeline, we will respond." Those two words are very important. This is not a diplomatic suggestion. This is not a polite negotiation. This is a threat, a direct threat from one nuclear power to another about what could happen if American actions in the Gulf disrupt Chinese energy security. And I need to guide you very carefully through what this warning really means, because this is not only about the Strait of Hormuz, this is not only about Iran. This is about whether the world continues under American one-sided control, or whether we are entering a truly multipolar era where other major powers will use force to defend their interests, even when that means directly confronting the United States. The answer to that question could reshape everything: how the global economy works, how international conflicts are settled, and what kind of world future generations inherit. Let me begin by explaining why China is giving this warning now, because China does not make threats lightly. China's whole foreign policy for the past 40 years has been built on avoiding direct confrontation with the United States. China preferred to grow economically, strengthen military power quietly, and avoid provoking American pressure. So why is China changing that strategy now? Why is China willing to openly threaten the United States over the Strait of Hormuz? The answer is simple. China has no choice. China imports about 40% of its total energy from the Persian Gulf. That energy moves through the Strait of Hormuz. If that strait is closed, if those tankers stop sailing, the Chinese economy does not simply slow down, it faces possible collapse. Chinese factories could shut down. Chinese cities could face blackouts. Chinese transportation networks could come to a halt. Chinese food production, which depends on diesel and fertilizer made from natural gas, will become difficult to sustain. This is not just economic inconvenience. This is an existential economic threat. So when the United States closes or allows the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and that closure continues for weeks, China sees its economic survival being threatened by American military action. China is now saying very clearly, we will not allow our economy to be destroyed by decisions made in Washington that serve American interests while endangering Chinese survival. Now, let me explain what "if you touch" really means in practice, because this is not abstract diplomatic language. This is clear strategic communication. China is telling the United States that if American military action continues to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, and if American policy continues to disrupt the flow of Gulf energy to China, then China will take action to defend its interests. What kind of action? China is carefully not saying. And that uncertainty is intentional. It gives China maximum flexibility. But let me walk you through the choices China actually has. Option 1, economic retaliation. China could impose economic costs on the United States in response to a Hormuz closure. China could restrict exports of rare earth minerals that American technology companies depend on. China could sell off U.S. Treasury bonds, increasing American borrowing costs. China could limit access for American companies to Chinese markets. China could also turn supply chains into a weapon, cutting off critical parts that American manufacturers rely on. All of this would seriously hurt the American economy, but it would also hurt China. Economic retaliation damages both sides, so this is probably not China's first choice, but it remains a powerful option. Option 2, military support for Iran. China could provide Iran with advanced weapons systems, intelligence support, satellite data, and economic assistance to help Iran continue resisting pressure. China could supply air defense systems that make American bombing campaigns far more costly. China could provide electronic warfare capabilities that disrupt American operations. China could also offer diplomatic protection at the United Nations, vetoing any resolution that authorizes force against Iran. This option allows China to raise the cost of military action without directly confronting American forces. It is safer than direct military confrontation, and it is likely the kind of support China may already be providing to some degree. Option 3. Direct military intervention. China could send naval forces to the region. China could escort Chinese-flagged tankers through the strait. China could create a naval presence that makes it impossible for America to maintain a blockade without risking a direct clash with Chinese forces. This is the most dangerous option. This is the option that could lead to direct military confrontation between two nuclear powers. But it is also the option China might choose if it believes its economic survival depends on it. And this brings us to the fundamental question. Would China really risk war with the United States over energy security? My answer, based on strategic logic and historical patterns, is yes. China would risk war. Not because China wants war, but because from China's point of view, allowing America to control whether the Chinese economy functions is unacceptable. It would mean surrendering Chinese sovereignty. It would mean accepting permanent lower status. And China has spent the last 40 years building economic and military power specifically to avoid being placed in that position. Let me give you a historical example to make this clear. The historical parallel, attack on Pearl Harbor. In 1941, the United States placed an oil embargo on Japan. Japan imported about 80% of its oil from abroad. That embargo meant Japan faced economic collapse within months. Japan had two choices. One, accept American demands and become subordinate to American power. Two, go to war to secure alternative energy sources. Japan chose war. Japan attacked on Pearl Harbor and invaded Southeast Asia to secure oil fields. This was not irrational. It was a strategic response to what Japan viewed as an existential economic threat. Now, I am not saying China will attack America the way Japan did. The situation is different. The weapons are different. The consequences are different. But the basic logic remains the same. When a great power faces an existential economic threat created by another power's actions, that threatened power may consider military options to protect its survival. China's current position. China is now in a position somewhat similar to Japan in 1941. China depends on energy supplies that move through a choke point controlled or influenced by another power, and that other power's military actions are disrupting the flow of that energy. China is being forced to choose between accepting economic damage or taking action to secure its supplies. China is choosing to warn America that action may come if the disruption continues. What this means for the current US-Iran conflict. Now let me explain what this warning means for the current conflict between the United States and Iran. Because China's involvement, or even the threat of Chinese involvement, completely changes the strategic calculation. America may have believed it could act alone, that it could close the Strait of Hormuz, strike Iranian targets, pressure the Iranian economy, and eventually force Iran to surrender. The assumption was that no other major power would step in to stop America. China has now challenged that assumption. China is signaling, if your war with Iran continues to threaten our energy security, we will step in. We will make this war more costly for you. China is effectively signaling, we will support Iran. We will protect our interests, even if that means confronting you directly. This changes the conflict from a regional war between the United States and Iran into a possible great power confrontation between the United States and China. And that is an entirely different level of danger and complexity. Because now America must calculate not only the cost of defeating Iran, but also the cost of managing confrontation with China. And those costs could become too heavy to bear. This is one of the most significant shifts in global power dynamics in decades. The era of unchallenged American unilateral action may be ending, and China's warning over the Strait of Hormuz could be remembered as the moment that shift became impossible to ignore. Let me walk you through what could happen if China decides words are no longer enough. Scenario 1. China provides advanced weapons to Iran. China could provide air defense systems to protect Iranian infrastructure, anti-ship missiles to threaten American naval forces, electronic warfare systems to disrupt operations, satellite intelligence to help target military assets. This would not necessarily end the war, but it could make it far more expensive and dangerous for America. American pilots could face stronger air defenses. American ships could encounter more advanced threats. Operations could be disrupted through jamming and interference. The cost in lives, resources, and time could rise sharply. Scenario 2. China creates a naval presence in the Gulf. China could deploy warships to protect its energy interests. Chinese naval escorts could accompany tankers carrying Gulf oil to China. China could declare that interference with these tankers would be considered an act of war. This scenario would place American and Chinese naval forces close together during an active conflict. The risk of miscalculation would become enormous. One mistake, one trigger-happy officer, one misidentified radar contact, and suddenly the United States and China could be exchanging fire. Once conflict begins between nuclear powers, escalation becomes unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. Scenario 3. China builds alternative supply routes. China could accelerate pipeline construction from Russia and Central Asia. China could expand overland energy corridors that bypass the Strait of Hormuz entirely. China could redirect its economy away from Gulf dependence and toward land-based suppliers. This avoids direct military confrontation, but it represents a permanent strategic shift. It means the Gulf loses leverage over the Chinese economy. It means systems built around dependence on Gulf oil weaken further. It means American control over global energy flows begins to erode. It also means China becomes less vulnerable to future pressure. Why this is also an economic battle. China's warning is not only about military strategy, it is about economic power and who controls the global economic system. For decades, the United States has exercised enormous influence over global energy flows through military dominance in the Gulf and control of major sea lanes. That control created leverage. Countries needing energy often had to consider American foreign policy because the United States could disrupt supply routes. This shaped sanctions, trade rules, and geopolitical influence. But if China is now willing to use force to defend its energy security and directly challenge American control over strategic flows, then that leverage weakens. China is effectively saying, we will not allow energy to be used as an economic weapon against us. If China successfully sets that precedent, other major powers may draw similar conclusions. India could seek protected supply routes. Japan could deepen independent energy security. European Union states could diversify away from any single route vulnerable to pressure. The broader structure of economic influence built around control of energy choke points could weaken significantly. Would this actually lead to war? This is the question everyone asks. Would two nuclear powers really fight over oil tankers in the Persian Gulf? The answer is, it could happen. Not because either side wants war, but because both sides may view certain interests as non-negotiable. America may see maintaining military dominance and strategic choke points as essential to its power. China may see energy security and economic survival as equally non-negotiable. When two major powers have interests that cannot be reconciled, and neither side is willing to give them up, conflict becomes possible. Not certain, but possible. And the risk increases every day the Strait of Hormuz crisis continues. Every day that the Chinese economy suffers from energy disruption is a day that may increase China's willingness to take risk to solve the situation. Every day that the United States maintains the position that only American interests matter in the Gulf is a day that increases the possibility of a Chinese military response. A classic security dilemma. This is what strategists call a security dilemma. Both sides take actions they believe are defensive, but the other side interprets those same actions as threatening. Historically, security dilemmas have led to wars that nobody truly wanted, but that each side felt forced to fight. What China's warning reveals about the global order. Now, let me explain what China's warning may show about the changing global order. Because this warning is not just about energy, it is about power. It is about China signaling that the unipolar world may be ending. For roughly 30 years after the end of the Cold War, the United States was the world's only superpower. American military power was largely unmatched. American economic preferences strongly influenced global rules. The US dollar dominated international trade, and many nations, even powerful ones like China, accepted that arrangement because challenging it seemed too costly and too dangerous. But China's warning over Hormuz can be interpreted as saying, that era is changing. We are now powerful enough to challenge unilateral American action. We are willing to accept the risks of confrontation to defend our interests. We will not allow our economy to be held hostage by foreign military decisions. Multipolarity, not replacement. This does not necessarily mean China wants to replace American dominance with Chinese dominance. It may instead mean China is demanding a multipolar world, a system where multiple great powers hold influence, and no single power can act alone without considering the interests of others. If China successfully demonstrates it can challenge American action, the global system could shift further. Russia may feel encouraged to challenge American influence in Europe and Central Asia. India may assert itself more strongly in South Asia. Regional powers could pursue more independent policies rather than aligning automatically with Washington. The world would likely become more competitive, more fragmented, and more prone to friction among rival powers. Let me explain what this could mean for ordinary people around the world. If you are in the United States, your government may face a choice it has not confronted since the Cold War. Number, step back from confrontation with China, accepting reduced American global influence. 2, escalate confrontation with China, accepting the risks that come with great power conflict. Neither path is simple. Both carry major economic, political, and security consequences. Both options are difficult. Both could mean major changes to American power and American prosperity. Your economic security, your job prospects, your savings, all of it could be affected by how this confrontation is managed. If you are in the United States, if America chooses escalation and it goes badly, the country could face economic crisis, military mobilization, potential wider conflict. If America chooses to step back, it could face a gradual weakening of its global position. Less demand for the US dollar, reduced ability to borrow cheaply, long-term pressure on living standards. If you are in China, China's government would be taking enormous risks. China may be willing to confront America to protect energy security, but that confrontation could go badly. The Chinese economy could be damaged by American retaliation. Chinese cities could face instability. 40 years of rising prosperity could be placed under pressure. If you are in Japan or European Union countries, you would be watching your two largest economic partners, the United States and China, move toward confrontation. You may feel forced to choose sides. Support America and risk losing access to Chinese markets. Support China and risk losing American security guarantees. Either path could carry economic and strategic costs. If you are in the developing world, many developing countries could suffer the most from great power rivalry. The global trade system that supports development could be disrupted. Energy prices may remain high. Food prices could rise. Economic assistance from wealthier countries may decline as they focus inward. Many nations would bear the consequences of decisions made elsewhere. What are Donald Trump's options? Option 1, ignore China's warning. Continue current policy and assume China will not act. This means accepting risks such as Chinese-supplied weapons reaching adversaries. Chinese naval escorts confronting US forces, a higher chance of direct incidents. But stepping back could be seen domestically as weakness. Option 2, negotiate with China. Offer to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for Chinese pressure on Iran. Seek an arrangement where Chinese energy security is protected while American interests are preserved. This is the most rational path diplomatically, but politically difficult. It will require accepting that China has interests America must account for. Option 3, escalate further. Threaten China with economic retaliation. Increase US military presence. Signal that American policy will not be limited by Chinese warnings. This is the most dangerous option and the one most likely to trigger direct confrontation. A possible outcome. My prediction is that escalation may come first. Warnings could be ignored. Pressure could increase. Each side may try to prove resolve, but reality often forces compromise. The cost of confrontation with China could become too high. Allies may pressure Washington to negotiate. Businesses may demand protection of trade relationships. Military planners may warn against simultaneous conflicts. Eventually, a negotiated arrangement may emerge. But even that outcome would represent a historic shift. America would have acknowledged that it cannot manage Hormuz without considering Chinese interests. Once that precedent is set, global power balances change permanently. China's warning can be summarized as, if you threaten our energy lifeline, we will respond. This is more than diplomatic language. It is strategic signaling. It suggests China may be willing to risk confrontation to defend core economic interests. That transforms the Iran conflict from a regional issue into a possible great power crisis. It suggests the unipolar era is fading and multipolar competition is rising. It challenges economic systems built around singular dominance. It forces everyone, Americans, Chinese citizens, allies, rivals, and ordinary people worldwide to prepare for a more competitive and uncertain world. Why Hormuz matters. The Strait of Hormuz is not just about oil tankers. It is about whether one power can still single-handedly control critical global choke points. China's answer appears to be no. And that rejection could reshape everything. Final question. The real question is not whether people want this change. The real question is whether they understand it and are preparing for it. Because the world may already be changing. Tell me in the comments, do you think China is bluffing? Would China really risk confrontation with America over Hormuz? Or will this warning force America to change course? Your answer may reflect what kind of world emerges from this crisis. Subscribe for continued analysis as this confrontation develops.